Welcome to Patome Insights YouTube channel, your go-to platform for insights on project planning and management. In today's video, we dive into project scope management and how it drives project success. Don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your family and friends. Project scope management is one of the most important aspects of successful project delivery. Many projects fail not because of poor planning or lack of resources, but because the project scope was not clearly defined or properly controlled. Project scope management ensures the project includes only the work required to complete it successfully. It helps the project team focus on the agreed objectives while preventing unnecessary conditions that may lead to delays, cost overruns, and confusion among the stakeholders. And this now brings in the part that we did in our previous video on project planning. And one of the first step in project planning, we saw that it is now defining the project objectives or goals. So the project scope management will ensure that you just focus on those agreed objectives so that you not go to unnecessary details that can lead to unexpected end results. So in projects such as software system implementation, construction projects, business transformation initiatives, or even community development programs, scope management plays a key role in ensuring that the project delivers the intended results. So let's first understand what is project scope management. And when you come to the meaning of the project scope management, this is a process of defining. So it starts with defining, planning, validating, and controlling all the work required to successfully deliver a project. So you must be able to define the work. After the definition, knowing that is what work is required to do this and that, you plan for it, you validate, you cross-check. Is it what we really need to achieve the success in our project? And also controlling all the work that is required. And when talk of the control part of project, actually this is checking out the final outcome against the initial plan. And this ensures that project delivers what is supposed to be delivered or what is supposed to deliver, and nothing more or less. So what does project scope management entail? So there are some questions that you need to ask yourself when you are working on your project, and especially when you are now on the scope management. Because scope, basically, these are the boundaries. The way you have boundaries, personal boundaries. Also in a project, you need to have boundaries. Knowing what is this project all about so that you not get yourself into the unnecessary details. So what does it entail? It entails what the project will deliver, the specific products, services, or results the project will produce. So what is expected from the project? That is what the first thing. What will that project deliver? Is it a product? Is it a service? Or what is the expected result by the end of the project? Then the other question that you will ask yourself is, what work is required to achieve these deliverables? When you talk of these deliverables, is what the project will deliver. And these are all the tasks, activities, and the processes needed to complete the project successfully. Then after knowing what am I supposed to do, what are the tasks, what are the activities, whom do I engage where and how and when, it's now when you go to the next one, what tasks are included in the project. So this one is more detailed. You give detailed description of all the work Remember, in the previous, we said what is required to achieve the deliverables, the tasks in general. So now we get into the details of those tasks and description of all the work that the project team will perform, and that informs you on the getting of the expertise and the skills that are required and needed to complete, to work out in the project. What tasks are excluded from the project? Because you might find yourself getting to some of the areas that are not needed, that are not required into the project. So what tasks are excluded? Remember, the previous one was what tasks are included. Now we are on what tasks are excluded from the project. And this one helps to clarify what is not part of the project and helps to prevent misunderstandings and unnecessary work in your project. So in simple terms, when you talk of project scope management, it just defines the scope, the project's boundaries. It acts as the roadmap. So the project team knows exactly what to focus on and what to leave out. So that is about the project scope management, the definition, understanding what it entails and what it is all about. And we can also look at an example of a project, because we mentioned a number of projects up there that we can work on. We talked of software system implementation, construction projects, business transformation initiatives, or community development. Now, let's pick an example from that. And then let's go with the project implementation, the software project implementation. And now, this is now for a company that wants to implement a new enterprise resource planning system, the ERP. Scope management will help answer critical questions, because the questions we've talked about up there. So what features should the system include? What is supposed to be covered in the system? And this one will define the core functionality the software must provide. For instance, we can talk of the ERP will be used in managing customer data and the sales orders, tracking inventory levels, or even generating financial reports, and also user authentication and access control. Now, for instance, let's say those are the features that our ERP in that specific organization is supposed to have. So, as a person who is working on the scope of that project, or rather as a project manager, clearly defining features ensures the team focuses on delivering the essential system components. And this will help avoid adding of unnecessary functions that may delay the project. Remember, we say when you talk of adding unnecessary components, you'll come and speak somewhere about the scope creep and the kind of impact it has on the project. So that is the first thing that you need to answer the question, what features should the system include? Now, after knowing the features that you need in the system, which departments will use the system? Will it be used by all the departments in the organization, in the company, or is it for a few or some departments? So this is now the second question you'll ask yourself. What departments will use, or rather which departments will use the system? And understanding who will use the software system ensures it meets all the user requirements. Remember, an organization has different departments. For instance, finance uses a system for budgeting and reporting. That is the Department of Finance. When you talk of Department of Sales, it will use it to track customer orders. Also, the operations department uses to monitor inventory. What is in store, what is out of stock, what do we need to add more? And this helps the team design features and the workflows that suit each department's need. So you find the departments that are not covered here. Like for instance, what we've mentioned here, the finance, the sales and operations, we've not covered the HR department. So if it is not part of the system, it will not include some of the things or items that are for HR and they are not useful in this case. So it will help you to do that. Now, after that, after determining the departments, you also go to what functions are outside the project. Now, when it comes to this, not every desired feature can be included in the initial implementation. Because when you start, remember, it is work in progress. You can keep on adding or rather even upgrading some of the features. So what functions are outside the project? For instance, when you talk of payroll management, customer mobile app, maybe the customers with time they'll need to have a mobile app for the system of the organization so that they can actually have ease and access. And you've seen it with different organizations that started just on Chrome, but now they have customer apps that the customer can create their own account, and if it is ordering, they order and they track the movement or rather the item that you've ordered. Also advanced data analytics and clearly stating what is excluded prevents scope creep. Remember, you mentioned of scope creep there above, and when you prevent scope creep, it ensures that the project stays on track and sets realistic stakeholder expectations, because the stakeholders, they have their expectations that needs to be met in this new system. Then, after determining what is outside the project, so that you not now start including things that are not needed, you go to what deliverables must be produced by the project team. So when you talk of the deliverables, these are tangible results of the project. What do you hand over? What is that? What will come out and it will be said, out of this project, we are able to deliver this and this. So the results, the tangible ones. And for example, these ones should include, now we are working on our ERP, the software system in an organization. And we can talk of things like fully installed and configured system. And when we talk of system, we are now talking of the software system. So the project team has now delivered a fully installed and configured software system, and also user manuals and training materials. Because remember, when you come up with something, you find the people whom you are working with, or the team or the organization, they are not so much acquainted and aware of it. So they need also user manuals. And remember, staff keeps on coming and exiting the organization, and the training materials. Then tested system with the functional workflows. Remember, you have to test the system after working on it, after developing it as a project team, to ensure that what actually you are handing in to the client, the deliverable, it's functional. And also technical support plan for go live. And when deliverables are clearly defined, the team can prioritize work. It can also allocate the resources well. Remember, resource allocation is very key, so that you will not find yourself allocating resources to areas that are necessary, that are not even in line with the project that you are working on, and also track progress effectively. So those are some of the questions that you need to ask yourself. Remember, we just took a case study of ERP when you are working on a software system for an organization. And when these aspects are clearly defined, the project team can work efficiently towards achieving the project objectives. And the stakeholders are less likely to have misunderstandings about what the project will deliver. They will be having a clear goal of the deliverables. Now, since we are on the project scope management, What are the objectives of project scope management? Why project scope management? What is the essence of the project scope management? And when you talk of the project scope management, the main objectives to this, one is to clarify project requirements. So it helps in clarifying project requirements. So it will help gather and document the needs and expectations of stakeholders. Remember, they need to be taken into consideration when you are working on the project, and this will ensure the project addresses real organizational problems rather than assumptions. Remember, when you work on a project on the ground of assumptions, chances are high that there will be scope creep. There will be also the issue whereby a lot of resources will be now directed to unnecessary areas and cost overruns and many other challenges. So this one will help gather and document the needs and expectations of the stakeholders. When you clarify, when you set, you have the scope management well done. For instance, in our case, when you talk of a software project, clarifying requirements may reveal that sales manager need real-time dashboards, while finance only needs monthly reports. And understanding these needs clearly will help to prevent wasted work, especially if it is done early. It prevents wasted work because you not start working on the things that are not necessary as per the project. So that is one of the main objective, clarifying project requirements and also defining project deliverables. Remember, we said the deliverables are the tangible results. So when you have a clear understanding and a management of the scope, it clearly outlines the outputs a project must produce, and not optional. It is a must produce. If it is a product, services, or the results that are intended at the end of the results. So in our case, the deliverables for the software implementation project may include installed system modules, also trained staff, because when you have the system that no one understands, it is of no use. So the staff must also be trained on how to use, operate, and even interpret and analyze the system and the operational reports, as well as system integration with existing tools, because you'll find this organization, or rather company, there were some existing tools, there are some existing systems or even plannings that were working in them. So it has to integrate them with the existing one, because most of the times you find it is coming up as an upgrade. And this clearly ensures the project team knows exactly what to produce and what defines success. Because every project, the success of a project is based majorly on the deliverables, the time, and also the budget. Now, how do you prevent scope creep? Because when you talk of scope creep, it is now when you are working against the project boundaries. Because the scope, we say there are boundaries. So the scope creep, it's when now you are getting outside the boundaries and you are getting in other things that are not part of the initial plan of the project. So when you talk of scope management, it helps to control the uncontrolled expansion of the project requirements. That is what we call the scope creep. That expansion of project requirements, uncontrolled. Just anything that comes in gets away into the project. So for instance, if someone requests a mobile app midway through the project without proper evaluation, it could delay the project and increase costs, because you are working on the system and then someone comes in and they say, we also need a project app, a mobile app into this system, yet it was not part of the initial plan. This one, it could cause a project delay and also increase the costs. So proper scope management ensures that all changes follow a formal approval channel, and this will ensure that Actually, you are not just picking anything, an idea that comes along the way that is now making it overwhelming to work on the project, especially for the project team, which will also affect its success based on the deliverables. Also, there is improving resource utilization. Remember, we are on the objectives of project scope. So there is improving resource utilization. And by focusing on only necessary tasks, project resources, and when you talk of project resources, these are things like the time, the budget for the finances, and also human effort, that is the human resource, are used efficiently. They are utilized well. So, for instance, instead of a team working on features that are outside the initial scope, they concentrate on delivering the core ERP functionalities on time. Another thing can wait. Another thing can be planned and follow the formal channels as we've seen in our previous when you prevent the scope creep. So everything is concentrated on delivering the core functionalities of the ERP. Remember, we are now still working on our case study of working on ERP, the system, software system for an organization. Also enhancing stakeholder satisfaction. Because when scope definitions are clear, when that scope is clear, it ensures that the stakeholders understand what the project will deliver. You really understand, as I work on this project, this is what should be delivered, these are the expectations, reducing misunderstandings and conflicts. So people not start having a debate midway. This is what should be, this is what should be. Everyone knows what should be delivered. So the stakeholders will be satisfied. Even as they work on the project, they work it with confidence, they work it without doubt, because they know they have a common goal. They know where they are headed to. Because when it is not clear, this will actually affect even the work input, the efficiency of the stakeholders, the project team that are working on it. Remember, when you talk of the stakeholders, it is anyone who has interest into the end results of the project. And this includes also the project team, the people who are working on the project, the clients, the community, the society, even the customers. So for instance, if the finance department knows that the payroll management is not part of the current project, now the project that we are talking about, they won't expect it during the initial rollout. So the Department of Finance, the finance guys, the money guys will not be having any expectations in it. They will know that this is not our thing. It is not having anything to do with us. So they will be satisfied even when the project is going on. They will not start poking holes and coming in and questioning things that might also cause delays, confusion, and also demoralize the project team. And this creates realistic expectations and a smoother project delivery. Because when it comes to delivery of the same project, nobody will be questioning, why is this and this not covered for, not catered for, and we are still part of the organization. So they clearly know and they are satisfied. So, in other words, to sum it up, when you talk of project scope management, it is a foundation for successful project delivery because it defines what the project will deliver, what work is required, what is included and excluded, and the expected deliverables. What is expected to be delivered, the tangible end results. And by clarifying these aspects, project managers can prevent scope creep. Because scope creep is a big challenge in projects, especially when you are working on complex projects, because it will also interfere with the work breakdown structure. So when it is done well, so the project manager will prevent scope creep. They'll also allocate resources well, because when you talk of the project, the resource allocation, in this case, we are talking of human resource, time, and budget. So be allocated efficiently, and the stakeholders will also be satisfied to ensure that the stakeholders are satisfied. So when you talk of the project scope management, so first of all, the scope actually ensures that all the changes are carefully managed and the project is delivered successfully. Now, having understood now what is project scope management, let us know what is the process of project scope management. What is the key process of project scope management? Because project scope management involves several important processes that guide how the project, or rather the scope of the project, is defined, structured, validated, and also controlled through the project life cycle. So these processes ensure that the project team focuses on the agreed deliverables. And this will also help them to prevent unnecessary work that could affect project time, cost, and quality. Remember, project time, cost, quality are very key, and also the allocation of the resources. When properly applied, these processes can help project managers maintain clarity, alignment, and control over the project from the initial stages to completion. That is throughout the project life cycle. And what are these processes? The first process of scope management is planning scope management. Everything starts with planning. Remember, we talked of the project planning. Also, for the scope, you also need to plan it. What should be done? What is the project scope to be done? So planning scope management, and the planning scope management is a process of determining how the project scope will be defined, documented, validated, and controlled throughout the project life cycle. And at this stage, the project manager will develop project or rather scope management plan. So the manager will have to get the scope management plan, and this will provide clear guidelines on how scope related activities will be handled during the project. And this plan becomes an important reference document for the entire project team and the stakeholders. So the scope management plan typically explains the following things. And what are these? How project requirements will be collected, how scope will be documented, and how scope changes will be managed, so that we now avoid the scope creep. Now, when we talk of how project requirements will be collected, this outlines the methods that will be used to gather stakeholder needs, such as meetings, interviews, or even workshops, because you need to know what is the expectations, what are the requirements in this project. And when you talk of how scope will be documented, this defines the format and documentation standards for recording project scope and requirements. When you talk of how scope changes will be managed, this establishes the process for reviewing and approving any changes to the project. So besides those three, there are also more, because you also mentioned of scope, the deliverables. So the other one will be how deliverables will be verified and accepted. And when you talk of the deliverables acceptance and verification, this now covers how stakeholders will confirm that the project outputs meet their expectations. And actually, that is what defines project success, is the quality to standard. So by developing clear scope management plan, the project manager ensures that everyone understands how scope decisions will be made and controlled. And this reduces confusion and potential disputes during the project life cycle when the project is ongoing. So after after planning, planning scope management, now we go to the next step, that will be collecting the requirements. What will be required for this project? So when you talk of collecting requirements, it is a process of identifying. First you identify, then you gather and document the needs and expectations of the project stakeholders, because it is out of what you deliver to the stakeholders that will determine whether the project was successful or not. So we have collecting requirements, and these requirements describe what the project must accomplish to meet the business objectives. So stakeholders may include project sponsors, because there are so many people involved in a project. So it may be the project sponsors, the ones who are sponsoring the project, and there are those expectations that they have in the project, the plan that they have. You also have the managers, the employees, the customers, or even the technical teams. So each stakeholder group may have different needs, because definitely the needs of the sponsor, they are not the needs of the customers, they are not the needs of the employees, the managers, and even the technical team. So each have a different needs. Some of them might be the same, and these needs must be carefully captured and documented. So when you are now working on the collecting requirements, can be collected in several ways from the stakeholders, which includes interviews with the stakeholders to understand their specific needs and concerns. You have interviews with them. You can also have workshops and meetings where the stakeholders collaborate to define system requirements through the workshops and the meetings. There can also be surveys and questionnaires that will help to collect feedback from the large number of users, because actually the questionnaires can reach out to a number at a go, and you can get responses from individual person. Also observation of existing processes to understand how current systems operate. And when you do the observation, you can identify the gap that is there, that is existing, and see how to bridge the gap even in the ongoing project, so that you not produce or deliver a duplicate of the already existing systems that operate in the organization. Also document analysis to review current reports, procedures, and the system documentation. So for instance, in the case of software implementation project, stakeholders may require or request for features such as user login and authentication to ensure system security. That is a requirement for the stakeholders. Also data reporting dashboards to support decision making, integration with existing systems such as accounting or customer databases, or even automated notifications for approvals, alerts, or even the reminders. So these collected requirements form the foundation of the project scope. If the requirements are not properly captured, the final system may fail to meet the needs of the organization. So it is very key to capture the requirements, to get to know, to collect the requirements for the project, so that actually as you deliver the final results, the final output of the project, it is actually meeting the needs of the organization. So when you talk of the needs of the organization, there are all those stakeholders that you've mentioned, right from the financiers, the managers, the sponsors, the customers, the employees, everyone there. Because in one way or another, every person will have their part and role to benefit or rather use the system. Then from there, after we've collected the requirements, we now go to defining the scope. And defining the scope involves developing a detailed description of the project and the deliverables it must produce. And when you talk of this process, it translates stakeholder requirements into a clear and a structured plan of what the project will accomplish. Now, this scope is based on the stakeholder requirements. What are they needed to? So the main output of this process is the project scope statement. So that is the main output. And the project scope statement acts as the key reference document for the project team. They will be making reference to the project scope statement and moment every time in the project when the project is ongoing. It is the key. It is the reference part. Just as we said, scope management is also the reference throughout the project and matters planning. So also for the scope, it is the project scope statement. So the project scope statement, it handles different areas, and typically it has to include the project objectives. What are the goals? What goals the project aims to achieve? The project objectives. Remember, that was the first step in project planning. So the goals, then also the key deliverables, the products, services, or the outcomes that the project will produce, the project boundaries. And this includes and excludes, this covers what should be included and what should not be included, or rather what should be excluded in the project. Remember we mentioned of that, the inclusion and exclusion of what should be and should not be in the project when you are talking and defining the project scope management. So, because project scope management basically covers the boundaries. Then we have the assumptions. Conditions believed to be true for planning purposes. So what are the conditions that are believed to be true for the planning purposes in the project? Then you can also talk of the constraints. When you speak of the constraints, these are limitations, because in every place there must be some constraints in a project. And these constraints are basically made on the three major parts of the project, the requirements that are used in the project, starting with the budget, the finances, time, the time given, the time set for completion of the project, and also the resources. The resources available, both material and human resources, and also financial resources. Then acceptance criteria. Standards that deliverables must meet to be accepted by the stakeholders. It will be so heartbreaking working on a project and by the end of it, the stakeholders reject the project, the outcome, the deliverables. So the standards, and that is what comes in when you talk of the project life cycle and development. There is an aspect of controlling that will check the final output against the initial plan, so that you deliver that which was planned. So for instance, when you talk of like a company that is implementing a business management system, the project scope may define it to include what? Sales management and the customer tracking, inventory monitoring and the stock control, and also financial reporting and the transaction process. So those ones are now an organization, a company that is now implementing a business management system. So in that project, may also exclude the following, because maybe the parts that are included are the sales management, inventory, and the financial reporting. So these ones are not, we are not saying that they are not important to the organization, but are they part of the project? Are they part of the system? Like the payroll management, customer mobile applications, and advanced artificial intelligence analytics. These are out of the boundaries. They are outside the initial plan. They are outside the scope that was initially established. So clearly defining these boundaries ensures that all stakeholders understand the limits of the project. They understand the limits of the project. They will also, no one will come and start now forcing other things to be accepted and accommodated into the project. And which, when you talk of all the stakeholders understand the limits of the project, this helps to prevent misunderstandings and unrealistic expectations. Because if you understand, you'll not be having expectations on the things that are not included in the project. So after that, now you've now worked on the scope. The next thing, after defining the scope of what to be done, it's now creating the work breakdown structure. So when you talk of the work breakdown structure, this is hierarchical. It is a hierarchical decomposition of the project into smaller, manageable components. Now you get it, you break it down, you divide it down, you subdivide it into smaller, manageable components. And this breaks the overall project's work into tasks and subtasks that can easily be assigned, scheduled, and monitored, so that you can also at ease track the progress of the project. And when you talk of the work breakdown structure, it will help the project manager organize work logically and ensure that no important task is overlooked, because it will set out what needs to be done, when, how, and by who, before you go even to the next. So it will help that, because that's why we call it hierarchical, because it ensures that things go in order. After this, we go to this. After this, we go to this. So that is the most important thing with the work breakdown structure. So for instance, when you talk of the software implementation project, it may include different components in the work breakdown structure. And what are the components that are required in the work breakdown structure? One is the requirement analysis, then system design and architect. Then we talk of software configuration and customization, system testing and debugging, user training and documentation, system deployment and launch. So each of these components can further be broken down into smaller tasks. You can break them down further into smaller tasks. For instance, we've talked of system testing. What is to be tested in this system? We can talk of unit testing, integration testing, and user acceptance testing. So break it down the project into smaller tasks makes it easier to assign responsibilities to the team members. You'll know, whom do I assign to this, who will be in charge of this, who will be working on this. So it makes it easy to assign the work, the responsibilities to the team members, and also estimate the time and the cost accurately. Because when you break it down, now you can know that this task will take this long, and maybe this is the required amount of money for it to be completed. Also track progress. Remember, it is hierarchical, so you know that after this we can go to this. You can easily track the progress and also identify the risks early. What is working and what is not working for the project, because that is the time you identify some things that are not in line with the expectations and the final output, the deliverables. So you work on it early. So the work breakdown structure acts as a foundation for project scheduling. Remember, when you are talking about project planning, in our previous video, we talked of the project scheduling. So the work breakdown structure is the foundation for the project scheduling. Also budgeting. When you are now coming up with a budget, it is easier to draw the budget when you break it down and you identify the cost and the expenses at each, and also resource allocation. So after breaking down the work into smaller, decomposing the work into tasks and subtasks, now the next process in the scope management is validating the scope. So when you talk of validating the scope, it is a process of formally accepting completed project deliverables. And when you talk of the validating the scope, it ensures that the outputs produced by the project meet the agreed requirements and expectations of the stakeholders. They are now satisfying to the stakeholders. They are meeting what was agreed upon. And during this process, stakeholders review the project deliverables and confirm whether they meet the agreed acceptance criteria. So now this is the time now we ensure everything, because remember we talked of collecting the requirements from the stakeholders. Now at this point, you've compiled everything. You've broken down the work structures. Now, what you are working on, the deliverables that you are now focusing on, are they acceptable to the stakeholders? So this one now will help to know, because during this process, stakeholders review the project deliverables and they confirm whether they meet the agreed criteria, the acceptance one. So for instance, in the software implementation project, stakeholders may review the installed and the configured software system. They can also review system functionality and the user interface, reports generated by the system, and also system performance and security features. And if these deliverables meet the expectations, then the stakeholders provide formal approval or the sign-off. And why is this important? Why is this process important? So the process is important because it confirms that the project is delivering the expected results. When they do now the validation of the scope, it ensures that now the project is delivering the expected results. It also prevents disputes about whether the work has been completed correctly, because the approvals has been done. So there is no time now they'll start picking up some complaints and disputes over the work. Then also ensure stakeholders are satisfied with the project outcome. Everyone is okay that what they presented has been catered for. So once deliverables are approved, the project team can proceed confidently to the next phase of the project. And what is the phase? Controlling the scope. So when you talk of controlling the scope, this involves monitoring the project and managing changes to the scope baseline throughout the project life cycle. Because remember, as we said, actually you find in every project, things will not just fall in line as they were planned. There will be some changes, and some of these changes are unavoidable. But of course, we can talk of the minor changes and adjustments. So during project execution, stakeholders may request new features. They may also request some modifications or even improvements on the system. So while some changes may add value, uncontrolled changes may disrupt the project schedule and increase the cost. So they have to be controlled. You don't just get every idea that comes in, you get it into the package, you get it into the project, you accommodate it. That one will cause more harm than good. Now, to manage this, organizations use a formal change control process. And when you talk of change control process, typically it includes submitting a change request. And this change request must be describing the proposed modification. Remember, you just not go to the project team and you tell them, I want us to do this and this. No, you submit a change request. Then after that, there's evaluation of the impact. You evaluate the impact of the changes on the project cost, because cost has been set. Remember, there's a budget. On the project timeline, when is the project supposed to be complete, and also quality of the project and the resources that are required and also that are available for the project. So after reviewing the impact, or rather evaluating the impact, you also review the request. So when you talk of reviewing the requests, this is done by the change control board or even the project sponsor. It is not for just everyone. So this is done by the change control board, the one that is controlling, to ensure that no unnecessary changes are coming in, because that will definitely lead to scope creep. And also after that, there is approval or rejection of the change based on the project priorities. It is not always that the changes will be accepted, not always that the changes will be rejected. So it will be based on the project priorities. So if the change is approved, the project scope, schedule, budget may be updated accordingly to accommodate the change. So scope control helps maintain alignment with the original project objectives and prevent scope creep, which is one of the most common causes of project failure. So for this project to be success, it's good to have project control actually on the change. Now, to sum it up, when you talk of these key processes of project scope management, they ensure that the project is clearly defined, properly structured, and effectively controlled. And as we've seen them, we've started with the processes. The first process we said it's planning scope management, then collecting requirements, defining the scope, creating the work breakdown structure, validating the scope, and lastly, controlling the scope. So let's keep in mind those are the processes in the project scope management. And by following these processes, project managers can ensure that the project they work on deliver the intended outcome on time, within the budget, and according to stakeholder expectations. Now, before we've been talking of scope creep, now let us have a dive on the scope creep in projects. And the scope creep is one of the biggest challenges in project scope management. And it occurs when new features, tasks, or requirements are added to the project without proper evaluation. Remember, we've talked of scope control. So if it is not properly evaluated, without proper evaluation, approval, or even an adjustment of the resources, and this mostly happens gradually. And if it is left uncontrolled, remember it is not happening suddenly, it is gradual. And if it is left uncontrolled, it can seriously jeopardize the success of the project. So what we mean is that scope creep is an uncontrolled expansion of the project's original boundaries. Remember, the scope are the boundaries. So an uncontrolled expansion of the project's boundaries, the original boundaries. And this usually happens when stakeholders request additional features. Project requirements are not clear. Remember, we have to be clear on our objectives. And when we are talking of the objectives in the project planning, we say there must be SMART, the acronym. So when they are not SMART, it can lead to scope creep or even changes that are not formally accepted, that are formally approved. Remember, we've seen the scope control and some of the things that the processes that it has to go through. You do the submission, there's evaluation, there's review, there's also approval and rejection. Now, when you talk of scope creep, let us get an example of a scope creep. And in this case, we are going to talk about the software implementation project that we've talked about initially. So when you talk of scope creep, it can appear in many forms in a project. For instance, in this software implementation project, adding new system feature. That is during development, a stakeholder requests a new reporting dashboard or even a mobile application. Even though these were not part of the original project scope, they are included. That is a project scope, creep. Also expanding project objectives. For instance, a project initially designed to automate sales and inventory tracking is suddenly asked to include HR payroll. Remember, it was for sales, now we have to get to the HR payroll and employee performance modules. That is also scope creep. Yes, it is not bad to have them, but there is that formal way of having the approval and acceptance, so that also there will be an adjustment on time, budget, resources, and the rest, and also the deliverables, the quality of what is expected, the end results for the stakeholder and the user satisfaction. Also introducing additional stakeholder requirements, like new departments or managers join the project midway. They were not there in the initial project planning, but now when it is ongoing, they gain and they garner interest into it. You get new departments or even managers join the project when it's ongoing, and they request changes or even additional functionalities. And this can come in as extra integrations with third-party tools. This can also really bring down the project, ensure it can lead to failure of the project. So these additionals, while sometimes well measured, or rather intentioned, increase complexity, require more resources. Remember, they were not in the initial plan, so they require more resources and can push the project off schedule. And that happens if not properly managed. Now let's talk about what is the impact of scope creep. What is the significance? What can it do, the scope creep? What are the consequences of scope creep? So when you talk of scope creep, it has some consequences that are not actually favorable, and one of them is project delays. So when unplanned features or tasks are added to the project, they increase the amount of work, causing the project to take longer than initial planned. So there is now time aspect has been affected. There is also budget overruns. So when more features require more resources, which can lead to spending more and even beyond the approved budget. So that is now its impact on the budget. Remember, we talk of the time, the project delays, the budget, and also increased workload for the project team. Because the project team may have sometimes to work overtime, or even juggle additional tasks, leading to stress and reduced productivity and efficiency in their work. And when this happens, it can also lead to reduced quality. Because remember, there's timeline. So rushing to complete additional features can compromise the quality of the original deliverables. Because maybe I'm working as a project manager, I've been given the time to deliver the project. But now there are new features that have been added into the project, and I need to complete the project within the scheduled time. So what will happen? The team will start rushing to complete the work with the inclusion of the extra features, and this one will definitely affect the quality. Also, stakeholder dissatisfaction. If scope changes are implemented haphazardly, some stakeholders may feel their expectations are not being met, and this will definitely create conflicts between them. So how should we prevent it as project managers, as leaders, as people who are in charge of different projects? How do we prevent scope creep? Because having effective scope control is very key to preventing the scope creep. Remember, when we are talking of the processes, that was the 6th process that we talked of, controlling the scope. And this cannot be done through practical strategies like clear scope definition. So document what is included and what is excluded in the project before starting. And this will involve using a detailed project scope statement and also work breakdown structure. Remember, we talked of the two in the process, the project scope statement and the work breakdown structure. Also, formal change control process. It's also another way. So any new requirement or feature must go through a structured change request process. Remember we said it starts with the submission. When we are talking of the controlling, it starts with the submission. So it should go through the structured change request process, and this includes evaluation of its impact on cost, time, and resources. Remember, we've seen those are some of the impacts it will have. Also having regular stakeholder communication. So keep stakeholders informed. Remember, one of the key skills of a project manager is communication. So keep stakeholders informed about project progress and any limitations. Educate them about the risks of adding unplanned requirements so that they will be aware that if in any case we decide to add another thing that is not part of the initial plan, it will have this and this impact. Also, prioritization of requirements. Focus on high priority features first. Then you consider less critical requests for future phases or releases. But first work on what is the priority of the current project. Then lastly, monitoring and tracking. So continuously compare the actual project work with the approved scope to identify early signs of creep. So actually monitoring and tracking and also controlling, it helps to ensure that you deliver what was planned. So by proactively managing scope and controlling changes, project managers can keep the project on track, deliver on time, and also satisfy their stakeholders. So when you talk about that, scope creep is one of the leading causes of project failure. It's not the only, but one of the leading causes of project failure. But it can be avoided with clear planning, disciplined change management, because some changes are inevitable, and a constant communication with the stakeholders. So what are the benefits of project scope management? Because you've talked of project scope management, and it was all, this video is all about the project scope management. When project scope management is properly implemented, it ensures that the project stays focused, organized, and aligned with the stakeholder requirements and also expectations. So proper management provides several benefits, which includes clear project goals and deliverables. So when effective scope management has been done, it ensures that everyone involved in the project understands what needs to be achieved and what the final outputs will be. For instance, in the software implementation project, clearly defining the deliverables, such as the functional sales model, inventory tracking, and also financial reporting dashboards, it ensures that the project team focuses only on what is needed. And this clarity reduces confusion and aligns the team and the stakeholders towards common objectives. So it will ensure clear project goals and deliverables, and also improved planning and scheduling. Because when the scope is well defined, project managers can create more accurate schedules and timelines. Each task's milestone and deliverables is clearly identified, making it easier to allocate resources and plan dependencies. So like for example, in the issue of the ERP, by breaking down the ERP implementation project into tasks that such as requirement gatherings, system design, configuration, testing, and training, the project manager can estimate how long each phase will take and avoid delays caused by the unplanned work. So you have the work well planned. Then you also have best cost management. Remember, these are the things that are affected. The benefits are just actually on the things that are affected by the scope creep. So scope management helps to prevent budget overruns by clearly identifying what work is required and what is excluded. Then inclusion and exclusion, because uncontrolled changes or extra features are minimized. And this protects the project from unnecessary expenses. Then we also have reduced project risks. Remember, we talked of managing risks, or rather risk management in project planning. And when defining the project scope and managing changes effectively, it reduces uncertainty and project risks, because potential issues such as unclear requirements or uncontrolled features that are requested are addressed before they impact the project, because it's a process that we've seen. There is a scope control. Then also increases efficiency and productivity, because when the project team knows exactly what to work on, they can focus their efforts on the tasks that directly attribute to project objectives, and this increases the overall productivity. And also there is higher stakeholder satisfaction, because remember, the stakeholders, they will come and we talked of acceptance and rejection. They will accept the project that is now meeting their expectations and they are satisfying the needs as taken in the requirements. So stakeholders are more satisfied when the project delivers exactly what was agreed upon. And not just agreed upon, but also on time and within the budget. So clear scope management ensures the expectations are realistic and the deliverables meet stakeholder needs. So to sum it up, when you talk of effective project scope management, it ensures that projects are focused, well-planned, cost-effective, and aligned with the stakeholder expectations. So clear scope management is not just a planning exercise. It is a strategic tool that protects the project from delays, because there's time, there's a factor there, overspending, there's budget and the cost, misaligned expectations while improving efficiency, productivity, and the stakeholder satisfaction. In conclusion, we can say that project scope management is a cornerstone of successful project management. It's the cornerstone. It provides a clear framework for defining what a project will deliver, which tasks are required, and what is explicitly outside the project's scope. And in this, there will be establishment of clear boundaries, and also it will also help the project team to stay focused on achieving the agreed objectives, the goals that were set, what is the expected outcome. So they will be focused on that, and this one will ensure that there will be no distraction to unnecessary work. There will be no rush to complete other extra work that was not there, that will affect the quality of the project, and it also caters for the conflict. So proper scope management has several advantages. It prevents scope creep, controls cost and resources, and ensures deliverables meet expectations. So scope management is not limited to one type of project. Every project, whether implementing a complex software project or other system, constructing a building, or leading an organizational transformation initiative, clear scope management is essential for delivering successful outcomes. A project without a well-managed scope is like a ship without a rudder. It may move forward, but it risks veering off course, wasting resources, and failing to reach its destination. So anytime, define the scope clearly in your project, control changes rigorously, and focus the team on agreed objectives. And this is the recipe for project success. So project scope management is a critical element of successful project management. It helps define the boundaries of the project, clarify the deliverables, and ensure that the project team focuses on the agreed objectives. By properly managing the project scope, organizations can prevent scope creep, can also control the costs, and deliver projects that meet stakeholder expectations. So in any project, whether it is a software implementation, construction, or even organizational transformation, clear scope management is essential for project success. Thank you. And if you found this video helpful, subscribe to Patome Insights for more insights on project management, leadership, and professional development. Like this video, share it with others, and let us know in the comments which project management topic should we cover next.